friends, welcome back to the Ouptut Guitar YouTube channel. We have a very special amp, my own personal 1964 Vox AC10 Twin. This has been a long time coming. I've owned this amp for a while actually, and never really featured it on the channel. It's nearly all original, but because of that, it's just not really been able to get a ton of use because I've been a little bit afraid of damaging it. So the plan here is to fully service it, get it dialed in. You know, we finished up that 1963 Vox AC10, and it really inspired me. That amp sounded fantastic, and I know this one sounds great already. So let's get this thing dialed in. Now, we're actually not looking at the amp itself. We're looking at the original cabinet. Let's flip it over. I've got the amp in a Headshell I had made. We'll look at that last. But just beautiful. You really honestly wouldn't even tell this is vintage if it wasn't for the grill cloth kind of sagging there, which they all tend to do over time, but it is extremely clean. So let's look at the back of the cabinet real quick. At the back here, we can see just poking through the original ELAC speakers, Vox branded. Those are super rad. We'll look at those closer in a second. But first, here is the original serial plate. You can see it says AC10 on it. I'll zoom in a little bit more for you guys. Serial number 1468. And again, this thing is very clean. Really nice example. You can see it's got some markings inside the cabinet. And here's the original ELAC speakers. Got a little code on the bottom there. Say 14 on the cone. And then they also have the Pulsonic cone codes on them. That was a 1003, which I'm not sure. Oh, you can just barely make it out over here. I'll brighten it up. You can kind of make it out there. So these are Pulsonic cone speakers. And I have it wired up to a junction box down here, project box, so that I am able to treat this as just a 2x10 speaker cab. Now let's go over and switch to the head cab so you can get a closer look at that. Here's the head cabinet. Now, it's not much to look at now because obviously we're missing a grill cloth, so it looks a little funky and the piping is overlapping here. None of it is installed permanently because it needs a grill cloth. The hard part, which I didn't know when I first ordered this, is that the modern Vox grill cloth is nothing like the vintage stuff, not even close. It's synthetic. It's got this shiny kind of tint to it. It's reflective. It's not built anywhere near like the original ones, and it stands out like a sore thumb. So I actually bought all of the available kind of Vox style grill cloth, eBay stuff, North Coast stuff, whatever. Bought all of them, and I tried sun fading them in just summer sun last year. That's how long I've had this, and they faded to a horrific color. In fact, let me go grab it real quick. I'm not sure how this is going to come across on the camera, but this is straight up green gold. Now this is the North Coast cloth, and it just turned this really bizarre gold color. And then this is the popular eBay cloth, which is pretty maroon originally, and it is faded to kind of a light maroon color, but it does not look anything like the original stuff at all. Obviously, there's a huge difference between these two. This was very much brown originally, but it has this sheen to it. If you can see that in the light, it catches the light. The original stuff has no sheen to it. So long story short, both of these I felt like were a complete non-option. So I had to pivot. Now, let me go show you what I've had cooking for a long time now. So here we have original 1965 plus Vox black cloth. So 65, they transitioned to the black, and they stuck with the black for a very long time. So this stuff is still available. You can still find it. And this was new old stock I found from a person. Now, I've had these out sun fading for probably 3 months now at this point, I would say. I've put in different positions. Right now it's just on the ground just because getting closer to summer, get some nice heat right above us during the day. And yeah, this has faded quite a bit. Unfortunately, I was going to try and cover a portion to show it before and after, but just didn't end up working. We had so much wind here, I couldn't keep anything on top of it. So it is faded quite a bit. I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell. The color is basically gone on the red. The green is still there a little bit. The black is faded. So this is going to continue to age in the sun and get closer to that vintage look. But this is much better than the brown stuff. So this is for the head shell for the AC10, and then this bigger cloth is actually for an AC30 cabinet I have from 64, 65, another super twin cab that I picked up that has not been featured on the channel yet. So that should be a really cool pairing. I've got original silvers for that AC30 cab, so this will go perfectly together once it's all done. But let's go ahead and check back with the chassis. Okay, so flipping the head shell backwards here. This was actually custom built for me by a guy in the UK who unfortunately is no longer doing this. He's the only guy I could find in the world that would be able to do a replica. So long story short, if you don't know Vox history, they did do an AC10 Twin or Super Twin head. Technically, it's a Super Reverb Twin, but it's completely different than the SRT that I also own. Long story short, they did it, and we were able to get dimensions of that. This is an exact replica of the head cabinet that this would have had. Now, this is a 1964, but it's got the gray. So 64 is a big transition year. And you can see how clean this thing is. Just looks really, really good. And then I did take the original vents from the cabinet and put them on here. Look at the back. It's got same Tolex as they originally had. This is an original screw. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a miscommunication with the builder, and ended up using the wrong screws, and I can't change that, but no big deal. And then we can see just in there, we got the original egg foot switch, and then this is my little junction box I made years ago to be able to run the 8 or 16 ohm outputs. So with all of that, the amp's been running. I've used it on recordings, I've used it live before, but it needs some love. So let's go ahead and open it up and see what we got. All right, let's see what we got here. Honestly, it's been a long time since I've looked at this amplifier in any real detail, so I am very, very curious to see what we find. And first and foremost, I guess we'll start with the transformers. We can see the choke right here. It is labeled as a Parmeco. Very common for these to have Parmeco transformers. They would also have Albion transformers. You know, there's a couple different different brands, if you will, that these amps would come with. Parmeco, I believe, is the most common. We bend it over, we can see more Parmeco stickers on there. You can see they're just barely hanging on, so that's why it's always so hard to tell on most Vox amplifiers. The transformer stickers just come off, so it's not a reliable way to tell what's what. And we can see just through the back there the RS 32 by 32 microfarad cap. I would assume that would be a replacement because I think it's actually dual 16 is what the schematic says, but we'll check in a sec. Otherwise, the chassis looks pretty good. From this angle, in the faceplate, very, very clean. Just a little bump right here. Otherwise, super clean. Even cleaner if I cleaned it. But yeah, as is, looks very good. And this, I've always known, is disconnected. So it's just there for looks, but it's not actually controlling anything. And yeah, let's take a look at the tubes we got here. So right off the rip, we got a lovely Mullard EF86. I'm not sure what is original to this amp and what isn't. 3021022. I'm not sure if it's a date code or what. But very nice EF86. The ECF82 here. Another made in Britain Brimar. Again, very nice tube. ECC83 is once again a Mullard made in Great Britain. So just a lot of very, very nice glass in this thing. For the rectifier, it would be a EZ81, I believe is the name for this. It looks like a EL84. This is made in Holland. 6CA4 EZ81. And then the power tubes are Phillips. Got the kind of seam on the top. That's one way to help identify what they are. But Phillips branded, and it says Great Britain on the bottom, so these probably would have been rebranded Mullards. Don't look the best. Definitely some scars here, so we'll have to confirm they're okay, but probably going to be replacing those just for safety's sake. And yeah, now the amp does work. I've played it many times, and I kind of stopped playing it because I knew it needed work, and I've been just kind of waiting to do this series, honestly. I had other priority projects and then took on customer projects that just kind of delay the process quite a bit, but I'm very excited to dive into this amp finally and get it running. I do want to know, I mentioned this with the other AC10 series, the 63 copper top AC10 series I did. the choke here, both of these leads are going to hold high voltage. So very, very dangerous. If you're like, trying to hot swap an EF86 or something and you bump into that and touch that, you're going to get the shock of your life from that. And even when the amp is turned off, these are connected directly to the main filter cap right here. So just want to point that out. If you ever, end up with the vintage AC10 or have one on the workbench or anything, to just be aware of that, because that is very dangerous. I've already discharged this amp, so I'm not worried about it, but just pointing out for you guys. So let's go ahead and get it propped up to look at the circuit. There's a lot to take in here. I'm going to just kind of go through from my right to the left and just point out everything I see and have noticed so far, but it's not a whole lot, to be honest. We already mentioned the selector switch for the impedance, or sorry, the voltage. It's just been hardwired, so it's bypassed. We've got a fuse added, which is good. These require a fuse because originally the fuse would have been in the plug, and obviously that's not the case here in the United States. Now this is an older replacement, but it's a bit short, so I'll probably want to replace that, just maybe not right away. Moving on down, we've got basically everything original outside of the two 220K resistors here. These are carbon comp swaps, nothing wrong with that. We'll test them, make sure they measure okay, but that's totally fine. Again, I mentioned all these resistors. I don't know what you call these. They're really cool looking, and I've never seen them on the market before. They're not, you see Iskras, for example. In fact, I think this might be an Iskra. Hard to see from my vantage point, but you got this type of resistor. Again, I don't know what you call those. There's different kind of Pyre you see in Marshalls, that kind of more reddish colored one. I don't know what these are called. So we'll make sure that those are testing okay and hold up okay. I just don't know anything about them. We got mustards. These are all correct. Already confirmed all the values are correct as you would see in the schematic. Moving on down, we got this original cap. You can see it's actually got a little dent in it. Not sure if you can tell. And then another little dent right here from the screw hitting it probably. We're going to be replacing this for sure. I believe this is a dual 8. Moving on down, the two little cathode bypass caps here, these teeny little blue Phillips. At first glance, I thought these were original just because I quickly looked at it. The originals would have been blue, probably Phillips, but they would have been bigger, and these are more modern caps. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. So you can hopefully see right there, it says 33 microfarad. So these would have been 25 microfarad caps. So this is bigger value. And then this one over here, you can't see because of the lettering. This is actually a 47 microfarad. So for the EF86, we've got 47 instead of a 25, so almost double. And then this is 25 to 33, which is not a big change. So this is interesting to me. And I'm kind of curious. I might just leave these, to be honest. I doubt they're leaking. There's very little voltage on these. So just kind of put a little pin on that for later. Moving on down, all of this is original and untouched. The pots are original and untouched. Everything looks good there. This trophy foil capacitor is original. I looked up many different amps made in this factory for whatever reason. Maybe they just had a big supply of these 0.1s. They just use these instead of the mustards. So that looks good to me. And then we can see some shenanigans happening over here. So this 750K and 470K resistor, both of these have been swapped, though it's very clean installs. They don't look, it's very little soldered, nothing crazy. So we'll be probably keeping this one. This one I'm replacing for sure. It looks kind of burnt. I don't know if it is burnt or not, but it just looks not great. So this is very interesting to me. The main thing to point out here is the 268K resistors here and here. These should be 220K resistors, and you can actually see there's 220Ks for the bottom inputs. You probably can't see them on camera, but they're here and here. And then you got the classic 1 megs. So the weird quirk with these amplifiers, if you don't know, is the inputs, there is no high and low, and they're padded down a bit with the 220K resistors. So they just they're handicapped a little bit from the factory. Now with the copper top AC10 we worked on, I showed some comparisons of how different the amp can sound depending on how you mess with this, and you can really open the amp up a little bit by giving it high and low inputs. I think what happened here is somebody modded it, but they modded it a long time ago. They used the same style resistors you see in the rest of the amp. They look the same vintage, so who knows how long ago they did it. The solder looks old, it doesn't look new and shiny. The biggest tell to me that it's not original is A, there's not another example I've seen that has this, and B, it looks like they kind of hooked the lead around, whereas you don't really see that anywhere else. where they kind of hooked it completely around the terminal. So my guess is this is a very old mod. So this would give you high and low inputs, but it's going to be different than the other amp we worked on, and this might not be the final configuration, but it is interesting. We'll probably try it out, keep it. I don't remember having any real problems with it, but curiosity killed the cat, as it were. And that's about it, guys. The only other thing to really point out is here. Zoom out. So I did the same mod on this amp as that 63, where I did an 8 and a 16 ohm jack. So you get both outputs. I did this years ago, kind of before I was really even doing amp tech work. This is just a side project. I'm going to redo it. But it is there and it's functional and works okay. And then I don't think I showed this yet, but it's got the original foot switch, which is noticeably different than the 63. 64, they changed it over to the Vox style. And yeah, that's about it for this top part. So let's go ahead and take a look at the lower half of the circuit. So this is where things get even more interesting. So we can see original transformers, that's all good. Worth noting real quick, the earth connection for the 3-prong is terminating here. So when we do swap that over for a longer one, we'll put that on its own point somewhere else. But this is kind of where things get very cool. The RS filter cap here, I don't think is original. It's a 3232. I think it should have been a 1616. I'll confirm on schematic. But either way, it is old and vintage. This resistor here, though, is the most interesting thing I see. This was not present on the 63. Now, I do think this is a replacement, but I don't think somebody would replace this unless there was one present there already. The reason I say that is this resistor is only present on the, I think, the earliest Vox AC10 schematics. It's not present on the vast majority of AC10 schematics, and I don't think it's present on the vast majority of Vox AC10s, at least not the ones I've seen. So this is another kind of area where Vox was powering down the amplifier, kind of bringing it down versus the AC15. So the schematic says, I believe, 200 ohms. This looks like it's a 100 ohm resistor here, and it's a well win, just like you see like on Marshalls and whatnot. So this is the output of the rectifier, and it goes to the first filter cap. The brown leads are the choke, and that goes to the screens and powers the rest of the amp, right? So this is going to be immediately powering it down from what it is capable of. This is kind of cool to me. I think we'll probably replace it with just a wire versus having a resistor there, but I do want to test it with and without. And then moving on over here, this bias cap, I think this might be a replacement. It is a different value than the schematic. Let me see if I can show you guys. I don't think you guys will be able to see it, but it is a 30 microfarad, 150 volt, which I don't believe is correct. And then this resistor is correct. Again, I don't know if it's a replacement or not. This is 130 ohm, 5%er. We ended up going to, I think, 100 ohm or 110 ohm in the other amp to bias it a bit hotter. So we'll see what this one looks like. And then this is kind of the last really interesting bit here. Can you see this? So these are the two resistors, the plate resistors, the resistors coming off the anode, and that's going to the output transformer. Again, this is the other place where the amp is kind of paired or powered down a little bit versus AC15. These resistors are not present in the AC15, in the AC30, basically any other amp I'm aware of, except for maybe the even smaller Vox amps like the AC4, for example. But you can see this one is absolutely roasted, toasted, and gone. This one looks like it's also seen better days. So those two are going to be removed, and we'll just do a wire from there to there and there to there. We already showed that test in the 63 AC10 series. That did give us a bit more power, so we're just going to bypass that. And then we will be adding screen grid resistors on this, which is not present. So just a little bit of a safety mechanism there. So we'll have to figure that out because there are no terminals available. So we'll have to see how we want to do that. And yeah, we'll be replacing this cap. Like I mentioned, we'll be taking this out, but we'll probably test it with it first if it confirms it's okay. But let's go ahead and measure the readings on these resistors. I'm very curious to see what they come up as. First up, the 100 ohm resistor measures 101, so that's totally fine. Let's see what this completely roasted plate resistor reads. So 107, it should be 100 ohm. It's 107. Despite it looking the way it does. That's pretty impressive. The other one measures 112, so that one somehow drifted even higher. And then these, I think these are supposed to be 1.5 Ks, these grid stop resistors, but they're, I guess it's measuring 1.5, but these should be, based off the color codes on them, 1.2 Ks. So slight departure from the schematic, I think. Yeah, both measure 1.5. Okay. 133.1 instead of 130. Pretty close. Okay, so all that looks good. Now I'm going to go through, check all of the resistors on the top here, see if any need to be replaced, and then I'll circle back with my main takeaways and a game plan. Just finished going through the amplifier and notating everything that stood out to me, so I'll run that through for you guys real quick. And to be honest, most of the resistors did measure out of tolerance enough that most people would justify swapping them. So for example, these 3 1 megs, they all measured about 1.3, so 30% out of tolerance there. And kind of going down the line, there's basically nothing that was, other than pretty much this resistor and this resistor, everything else was a good ways out. This 220K measured 270K. This 470K measured 600K. This 1 meg measured 1.3. So whatever these resistors are, I don't know what they're called. I actually had higher hopes they would be really good because they seem kind of built similar to the mustards where they're sealed, so to speak. And but no, they definitely drift quite a bit. So all good, not the end of the world by any means. I think what I'm going to do, because it's my personal amp, is I'm just going to leave them. There's nothing really that's going to throw anything out of whack here. It's going to change the sound a bit, but also I think that's part of the charm that makes each individual vintage amp sound unique and possibly special. Just shotgunning all these out. Like if I were to take this to, random local tech number 4 and give them this amp, they would measure all those resistors and they would swap every single resistor in this amplifier, shotgun the entire thing. Maybe they'd keep the caps if they were good, but otherwise they'd replace every resistor. And that would just be such a shame. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think it's necessary in most circumstances, and certainly not in this. So I'm going to leave it. Similarly with these cathode bypass caps, I'm just going to leave them for now. We'll play with it, see if I want to test that or mess with it. But I think my general approach to this amp is really going to be leaving it alone and doing the bare minimum, which really gets to this point. This filter cap, definitely want to replace that. I would consider that the bare minimum. And then similarly, we have the bias cap down here. That would be also bare minimum. Removing those plate resistors like we talked about, putting in jumper wires, that would be also bare minimum for me. And yeah, I think that'll be our starting point. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave all the resistors in. Yeah, like the 100Ks here, they measure 130K for the phase inverter. So you're going to have a higher plate resistor. That's going to change the tone a bit, going to change the gain a bit. But it might be for the better. So I'm pretty happy and content with leaving that. The only real exception might be this 220K, just because I don't love the way it was installed. It seems like it might have just been tack soldered on top here and kind of tack soldered down here. This is a really hard area to reach. So I got to think about it, but we might replace this one. Otherwise, I think we'll be leaving pretty much everything here outside of this cap. And then on the bottom side, I just want to show this really quickly for the schematic here. So this is kind of the more traditional schematic. This is from the Steven Grosvenor book here. And the rectifier, you can see I drew in the resistor that was added in. So you can see there's no resistor there on the schematic. It goes straight from the rectifier output to the filter cap, to the choke, and then to the other filter cap, and then off to the B+ rail. So that's not the case in this amplifier. But if I go to this very old schematic here, this is an original schematic. And if we look down here, we can see this. Here's the output of the rectifier, and we got a 200 ohm, 5 watt resistor. I think this is a 7 watt well win here, so that's plenty. And but that one is measuring 100 ohm versus 200 ohm. So you can see at first the output goes through that, which pairs it down, and it's not super dissimilar from the SRT, which also has a resistor, large resistor that is pairing down, and it does not have a choke in that case. So yeah. So this is 100 ohm, and then it goes through that and goes through the choke. Now it's worth noting the choke value is a 5 Henry in this case, whereas on the other ones, it's an 8 Henry. So if we go ahead and take a look at this choke, I don't remember if it has markings. Let's see. It's right there. What does that say? 5 Henry. So I guess any amp with a 5 Henry choke ended up with the extra resistor there to kind of pare it down. So removing that resistor could be a bad idea with the smaller choke. I'm not sure. We're going to play with it a little bit, but like I said, at first, I'm going to do the bare minimum, replace the filter caps, and that will also include this RS cap here. I think we'll just throw in an F&T. Now this is a 32 by 32 that we mentioned before, but if we look at the schematic, let's see here, it's a 16 microfarad, and if I go over here, you can see also 16 microfarad. So yeah, just a later replacement. If you're going to have a higher filtering, you're going to get less ghost notes, and I don't mind ghost notes with Voxes. So I don't mind if it's a bit more noisy and a bit more lively, which is what a 16 will give you. So there's the general overview. Now I'm just going to kind of get stuff set up and get to work. Well, the can cap fought me to fit. It's quite a bit longer than the one that was installed here, so you couldn't put it in from the top, and putting it in from the bottom, it was also a bit thicker, so a bit of a tighter fit, but we ended up getting it in there okay, and I'm just kind of laying out how I want to install the wires. Now, to add in screen grid resistors here, we're going to have to figure out what to do with this connection right here. So this wire would be going from the supply here, and but we need it to go to two different resistors that then go to these two pins. So there's not an available space right here on the existing tag strip. So there's a couple things we could do. We could install a new tag strip, which is not something I really want to do. It would need to be in this area, and there's not really much space or room to do that. So another thing we could do is go ahead and try and disconnect these two yellow wires and then just run them directly to the tube sockets, because we're removing these resistors, and that would give us the two available positions. So I think we'll probably do that if it'll reach. I'm not actually sure if this one will be able to reach all the way over here, so we might do just this one and run it down here, giving us this available for the grid connections. So we have to remove these resistors anyway, so we'll do that first, and then we can kind of assess from there what options are available. All right, fairly quick time lapse. You guys probably saw. I'm not going to make you sit through all of that, but you can see what we've done here. Added in the screen resistors. These are 1K 2 watts. And then we have the new connection just a bit shorter there. Remove the plate resistors. Connected the output transformer directly to the anode, which is pin 7 of the left EL84 tube socket. And the right one, we added a wire running over to the tag strip where we joined it, since it wasn't long enough to reach on its own. So with that, this whole section of the amp is done outside of potentially changing the bias resistor, and looks pretty good. Next up, we want to go ahead and remove this Hunt's capacitor. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to be able to fit the two F&T replacements in that spot. There's not a lot of space. So we'll see what we got to do. On the other AC10, I used 8 microfarads, which is the correct value. I just don't have any more of those on hand. And 8 and 10 is not, there's no noticeable difference between those two values. It's more the size that's going to make this a bit trickier. But go ahead and get a little bit of solder flowing on these. Here you guys can hopefully see how dented it is everywhere. Kind of crazy. But yep, it's the original Hunt's capacitor, made in England. 2 8 microfarad 350 volt caps. So let's get our replacements. The goal is to replace that with 2 10 microfarad caps. You can see there, one of them is literally the size, well, maybe not literally, but pretty close to the size of the dual original, which is going to make things tricky. So I'm going to have to play around with this, see if I can get it to fit. Hopefully we can, but if not, I can order more parts. I just don't want to delay it much longer. I've got kind of a specific deadline for this. It does fit that quite well. Okay, there we go. It is a bit unconventional the way it's set up here, but we've got both positive ends kind of facing each other, but they are insulated from each other, and then they are both put in place. There's some silicone holding them in place as well. This one's still dry, so I can still move it. And then I had to run the ground connection all the way over here because there's no other ground point over here, and I didn't want to do a new one or go to this one or do something over here. I want them both grounding at the same point. This is the preamp ground. This red wire goes down there, and that's where all the grounds basically connect to. I could have run it up over here to a ground right here, but I wanted to have those together. So that gives you a bit of an unconventional setup, but there's nothing wrong with it. It should work just fine. So with that, we are basically done for now. We can go and fire it up, make sure it's working okay. That work we've done so far is okay. And then we can kind of continue on with some of the resistor swaps and whatnot. Now I want to just go ahead and check the output of the amplifier with that 100 ohm resistor out of the rectifier, paring down the power. I want to see what it's putting out in comparison with the 63 we just finished working on. So I got the multimeter hooked up to the speaker box. We're running 8 ohm load, and we're checking for AC volts. So we'll go ahead and turn it on, and I've also got the scope just off screen here so I can make sure the waveform is looking good, and I've got the signal generator to give us the lovely signal. So we'll do a 400 hertz. Let's go 1K. We'll measure the output of 1K here. Turn that on. Switching to the handy cam here, show the signal generator. So we've got it set to 1 kilohertz. And then this is the oscilloscope showing us the waveform. Now if I adjust the volume control in the amplifier, we can see it goes down and up. So what we're looking for is that point right where the waveform starts to clip. So you look at the very bottom section, see how it's starting to get that little edge to it. So we want to back it off just to where that kind of goes away, right about there, I'd say. So right about there. So if we look at the amplifier, that is a 10.2, 10.24, 23, somewhere in that range. So let's go ahead and do the math and see what that gives us. So it's putting out roughly 13 watts, which is super fascinating. If I remember correctly, that's actually more than the other AC10 we had in. Now, granted, that had a replace power transformer, so maybe there's something there. But this amp has that additional resistor that is pulling down the power, whereas the other one did not. They both had the 100 ohm plate resistors removed, so that's equal between them. So very interesting. Old tubes as well, so I would guess it might even get a bit more power out of other tubes. Let's go ahead and see what the bias is at. All right, I remeasured everything. 309 for plate to cathode voltage, 2 tubes sharing 1 cathode resistor, which measures 134.6, and the voltage across the cathode resistor is 12.1. That puts us at 109, so running a bit hot, but that's totally normal and standard for a Vox like this. And again, interesting that this one seems to be running quite a bit hotter with a much larger cathode bias resistor versus the 63. So yeah, just kind of fascinating stuff. Either way, this amp seems to be running very healthy already, and we haven't done anything as far as resistor swaps are concerned. Just replacing electrolytics. That's it. So I think from here we can go ahead and just tidy up some things. Probably swap this 220K right there because that bothers me. Probably swap this 470 because that bothers me. And I think we'll probably leave it from there. All right, those resistor swaps look good. I think we can go ahead and move on. I'm going to leave this resistor here. This looks like it might be original. Hard to tell. The solder looks old. Doesn't look like it's been touched. But maybe it was a very old swap. It is a different type. So I don't know, but I've also seen Voxes with this type of resistor in it. So for now, we'll leave it. We'll circle back if we need to. So here's something kind of interesting. I decided to throw in a new set of JJEL84s just to see how the performance would change versus the kind of tired looking Philips branded EL84s that came with the amplifier. And right away, the bias got a bit hotter. So we can see it's now 112%, which is a bit hotter, still in a what I would consider acceptable range for something like this. But more kind of interesting is actually the output increased. So now we're running 11 volts as the output before it's clipping right on the edge like I showed you guys before. So if I were to do 11 times 11 divided by 8 because it's 8 ohms. We're now putting out 15 watts on this thing. So the AC10 no more. This is the AC15 basically. Pretty cool to see that. And you know, I always thought this amp punched way above its weight class and sounded a lot louder than 10 watts to me. You know, I had Princeton's, for example. I've had several Princeton's. I always felt like this amp sounded louder. So there you go. It's putting out 15 watts clean. Pretty impressive. So even with the 100 ohm resistor between the rectifier and the choke, which is bringing down the voltage in the amplifier, it's still putting out a ton of power here. And if I were to remove that, we'll get a little bit more for sure. But you know, at what cost? We're already, you know, in the low 300s as far as plate voltage is concerned, which is kind of right on the doorstep of too high. So with modern wall voltage, it's seeming okay. Everything's running okay so far. But, you know, I don't think we'd want to push anymore. So we're going to leave that resistor, at least for now. But yeah, I'm really pleased with this thing. It's it's proven to be a little fire breather, which is what I've always told friends. This thing is a fire breather, and there you go. There's the proof. Need to do a little hand-up accountability here. Thankfully, this is my amp, so it's not a huge deal, but I accidentally kind of melted the terminal strip here. I removed the old heat shrink and redid this connection. I'd done it so many years ago, and I just want to do a new solid J-hook with new heat shrink. I did that, and I used the heat gun to, you know, to heat up the heat shrink, obviously. And I had a new nozzle on the heat gun, which is more like a cone style. So it really focuses the heat, and I totally underestimated the dramatic increase in temperature and the speed by which the temperature comes out of it. And I just totally melted the terminal block. You can see it just looks nice and sad. So, whoops, my bad. Hand up accountability. I did that. And it's something to look out for in the future for myself. Be very careful with that, but I just want to point that out. I'm sure somebody would notice it, and I'm always going to notice this now whenever I look at the amplifier. But anyways, and I did also add a little zip tie just to hold these two together. This is the foot switch. So anyways, onward. Wrapping up the last little work with the amplifier, I decided to do a new 3-prong. This is a nice 15-footer here. And we've got the hot going to the fuse, going to the switch. We got the neutral going to the switch. And you're probably saying, Tanner, the neutral looks really long. It is, but the ground goes underneath to an open terminal point that was not being used. And as you can see, it is longer. So it is to code. So there you go, 3-prong installed. And I also cleaned up this ground a little bit since this is the ground for the transformer. And with that, we can put it back in the cabinet and do some testing. Really happy with this so far. Okay, this is going to be just a quick little test of the amp just to show working, try the tremolo, etc. I want to do a full-on demo of this amp properly mic'd, comparing it to my AC10 SRT, since I don't think there's a video on the internet that has done that yet. So we'll get to that. This is just going to kind of close this video off, and subscribe. Stay tuned for that future video. So anyways, we've got the original cabinet with the original ELACs in it, and I've got the head off my shoulder here so I can just easily reach the controls. So let's start off with the... We're in the vibrato channel here, so let's just hear what that sounds like. Extra gain boost is from the tremolo. We talked about this before. Cranking the amplitude all the way up will give you that extra gain boost. So it's fairly bright, this channel. It's the EF86 channel. Let's go ahead and turn it up more. Let's go halfway up, see what that sounds like. Great, let's go 3/4 of the way up. Okay, that sounds awesome. Let's just dime it real quick. Wow, okay, that's quite loud. Let's go halfway. Let's turn the trem on. So we want to bring the amplitude all the way down to get the most depth. See what that sounds like. Pretty good. I mean, it's not the deepest, it's not the most interesting sounding. The SRT has a better trem, in my opinion, as does the full AC30. But yeah, totally serviceable. I do think that ECF82 tube that does the tremolo is a little weak. So it probably could be a bit better, a bit more punch to it with a new tube. It's got an old vintage one in there. Let's move over to the normal channel now, and we'll turn the tone. So the tone was, the cut control rather, is about up 75%, pretty bright in the EF86 channel, particularly after we did the input mods, or the input mods were done to this amp. Let's go ahead and turn it up. This is a quarter, so just barely on, and cut control off. No tuner, no pedals, guitar straight in, so is what it is. This is cut control 75% up. 50% up. Cut control off. I like 50%. It's pretty clean. And we are in the high inputs, by the way. So let's go halfway here. See what that sounds like. 'cause love how much these clean up. That's my favorite part of the old Vox amps, is they get so grindy, so mean sounding, and then you just roll them back and they're just the prettiest clean. I'm on a humbucker stock Gibson wiring here, and so pretty. Alright, let's go all the way up real quick before I get yelled at. It's a great amp. This thing is awesome. And this is, again, the original ELAC speakers, the 10-inch, teeny little magnet speakers. They sound so good. I've not run into any modern speakers that sound like them. I've tried a few. The Golds sound nothing like them, Gold 10s. That was a terrible match in this amplifier. Let me turn it down, dime there. And yeah, nothing sounds like them. They're awesome. Now this thing really shines through the AC30's 212 cabinet with the original silvers. That's where it goes up a level for me. So I will save that for a future video where we'll properly mic in all this. What you're hearing is literally just the camera mic, and then I have a phone just on the other side of my garage here capturing some room, and those are just gonna be blended together. So anyways, rough playing, whatever, we're just showing you guys the amp, but I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the restoration little video here, and until next time, see ya.